Hey, what is happening out there in Bitcoin world? Just playing around with some charts here on a Sunday afternoon, taking a break from packing, trying to move out of this house and into another one. Has been, some take some time and stress. So what I like to do is build charts and look at charts. So I'm looking at Bitcoin dollar on the daily here, just using a Coinbase chart. I was just kind of playing around. What I've done is I've kind of thrown some psychology markers on here just for kicks and giggles, and then also some Fibonacci lines and some indicators just to play around with charts, see what's going on. So what I did here was everybody saw that that market psychology chart that you've seen like 1,000 times on Twitter. I've kind of used that as a guide for looking at Bitcoin over the last couple of years. Started back here with hope, and then moved up to optimism, and then and get into a stage of belief, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And then we get into the thrill and euphoria. And the last time it rallied up, close to 20,000, it's this small little there was a high, and there was another new high just after it, and then it dropped. Excuse me, and then it dropped after that. That euphoria right there, or that bearish divergence, is one of the signals that when you look at the RSI, with the price making a almost basically the same high or just a little bit more, but you notice on the RSI indicator that it dropped here. So this bearish divergence between the RSI and price was a nice signal that we're kind of topping out and working our way to the downside. And then we got into denial and complacency and anxiety and panic and anger. Then we had a little suckers rally here, a little bit of false break, got into an area of depression, and then we got into an area of capitulation. And then at this point, the price made a low and then another lower low. So I got a bullish divergence marked right here and if you look at the RSI here, uh, that's a nice signal here that we could be bottoming. And then you can use ADX and other indicators, to help validate that too. I just threw the ADX on here. We can kind of look at that here too. But one of the things that I was looking at here is the break of this trend line is kind of like, go back to where we were on hope here before we had a nice little, move up to hope, and then we had this area of optimism, and then the same kind of thing here. We had hope and then an area of optimism. And then and then we broke up even higher off of optimism and got into this area of belief we're in. Uh, I was marking this area of belief as with a trying to see if there was a high here and moving to another high. But the thing is, the RSI was not signaling like it was a euphoria bearish divergence here. So that's why I was thinking that this area of consolidation is just an area of belief before we break out into thrill and then euphoria later on, this year and maybe into next year. So I'm just saying that this could be a nice little psychology part where we're going to break out, and it kind of times in with the halving that's coming up and all of that. But another thing I threw on here was if you look at the area of optimism I have marked here, and then you work your way down to the low after the area of optimism. So like over here, I had an area of optimism and it had a little bit of a low right at this point, and then it moved up to belief and then had a little bit of a drop and then it broke to new highs. So it's the same kind of thing here where it dropped, had a little bit of a rally, dropped a little bit, and then it broke. So it's the same kind of pattern, just a little bit different timing, but the same kind of deal where you made a new high above optimism, and then got into an area of belief. But this area of belief, after it made a high, it was a sharp, quick move to the downside here. So it was like kind of like a quick zigzag pattern to the downside, which measured just about 40% off the high to the low right here before we just kind of V-shaped here, worked our way up, made a new high before we got into thrill and then euphoria. But kind of alternating this kind of view to where we are today. Once we broke to the low to the high here above the optimism stage and got into an area of belief, we made it up to a high. But this time it's come down and we've been kind of back and forth in this area of consolidation. So quick zigzag V pattern here, but this time it's a little bit more of consolidation. And from the high to the low here is about 34%. So that's a nice, not exactly the same percentage, but it was a nice correction off the high. So as we're moving through, this area of consolidation, I've been waiting for a break of this trend line to the upside with some momentum behind it. But so far the ADX, which is the white line here that I'm circling, is still very low on momentum. So I feel like we can still touch the bottom of this uh, kind of triangle pattern that we're looking at here with this lower trend line, or we can even go all the way back down to the 61.8%, which is 94.26. It kind of wicked down through the 61.8% here a couple times, but this 9400 area is going to be an area that I think a lot of buying interest could come into the market. It's currently breaking 10,000 again to the downside. We're at 99.84, so I wouldn't be surprised to still see some downside here as we work toward the apex of this pattern, because without any momentum, this thing's just going to continue sideways tighter and tighter, and then hopefully we get an explosion one way or the other, and we break out of this area consolidation. Even though we had that nice drop the other day, it's still inside this area of consolidation, so we really haven't broke out one way or the other. But I'm thinking upside here after we get done with this area of consolidation, but take into consideration that we could go a little bit lower before it happens. So I don't know. It was kind of fun. I really like to look at psychology of the market, so along with patterns in the market. So since there was no bearish divergence happening on this high, I don't think that this trend of psychology is over. So after this area of belief and we break to a new high, which I have another, the 61.8% level off this high and low back when is right around 13.3. We went a little higher than that, kind of wicked up from that, but we found some selling interest pretty quickly. So I think, the thrill stage, just like we went V-shape here and we worked our way up, and it wasn't until this point that we broke above it. Came back down and tested it, but then we started getting really into the thrill and euphoria stage. I think that same thing's going to happen here. We can break this trend line to the upside and get back up to the previous highs, but for me, we need to break out of this area and get a new high to start the thrill and euphoria stage. So until we get above 13.8, psychology-wise, people aren't going to be thrilled until they see a new high, and then we'll get into the euphoria after that, and then probably break into new highs, and get all crazy, getting above 20K or maybe even 25K, somewhere around there later on. Probably not this year, but you never know. But maybe into 2020. And also I'm going to keep an eye on the RSI here. One thing is just a quick look here is ever since this point right here, because we know this now. If we look back in hindsight, this December was the low, and it came back up, didn't make a new low, and then we worked our way up. So if you look at the RSI right here, right at this point is when it broke up on this white dotted line here that basically is a support and resistance flip for me on the indicator itself. So you have a resistance that pops the market into what is now a bullish market. Yeah, it went sideways here for a little bit. We came back down and tested that line, but it held, and then we've worked our way up ever since, and we've been in this bullish move. And so far, the RSI has not dipped back down below that line, so we're still longer term bullish in the market. We've just been in this area of belief or consolidation in the market, and then we should work our way to the upside. As the RSI finds support in here, we find buying interest near fib levels and go from there. But until we get some momentum in the market, more sideways is going to happen. Because when you look back on the ADX, like when it broke out of the belief section right here, and it worked its way to the upside. As you can see with the ADX, it started to increase the white line right here as the bulls, the green positive directional index, started to take over. So at this point, when we broke out of belief and into thrill, we saw a nice little move here for the bulls. Other areas of break, you can kind of go back in history to look at some of the areas where it kind of started to take off and break into trend lines. Like right here, it broke this trend line, got us some hope because we finally broke this longer trend line, and then we had an area consolidation above it. But at the time of break, the ADX was increasing and the bulls were in favor. And the RSI was increasing all the way up through here, so you were getting buying interest all the way, and then that gave us a little bit of hope and optimism. So what I'd like to see is this ADX start to increase, but the green positive directional index will also have to be increasing also, but most likely not going to be happening until we get price back up into the 12-13 range, and then break out to that new high. So next, when we see a new high breakout, is probably when we'll see the ADX finally starting to kick in, because it is a lagged indicator. I just use it for validation, not for trading purposes. So uh, that's what I was just playing around with charts here on the Sunday afternoon. Here in the U.S., I know it's different time all over the place, but any questions, comments, or concerns, I'm at FiboSwanny out on Twitter, so feel free to DM me, and I'll be happy to talk charts. All right. Peace out, everybody, and happy trading.